Welcome to the official Lawyer Minds podcast. Lawyer Minds is an ever-growing ecosystem for all the resources modern lawyers need. As the official Lawyer Minds podcast, we'll discuss everything from the latest happenings on the website to industry news. Get ready. Here we go. It's time to dive into the minds of successful lawyers. Here are your hosts, Tad Thomas and Mike Campbell.
Tad, how's it going, brother?
It's going well. I just got finished teaching a trial practice class virtually for the first time.
All right. That sounds like fun. I
wish I had the option of attending law school virtually. I drove an hour and a half each way to my law school.
Really?
Yeah.
Good for you. That's dedication, man.
Yeah, it was the only one I could get in.
Now look at you.
Yeah.
I tell people all the time, don't look at where the person went to law school. Don't look at what the person, no one's ever come in and said, hey, show me your grade card from law school.
No, it's like, and it helps you get the first job, but after your first job, how many times have you ever had, I guess I haven't really applied for that many jobs since I got out of law school, but every other job, you got a license. I know you. Yeah. You do great work, right?
You're either going to make it or you're not.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that comes down to just someone's ability to want to go to work and do work.
Yeah.
And regardless of whether you're doing what we're doing or anything else.
Yeah.
So, we've got an interesting interview coming up, and I was thinking about media and lawsuits, and I always go back to a lady by the name of Candace Anderson, who was convicted in the mid-2000s for driving her car off the road. And she said that there was something wrong with my vehicle. It was a GM, and she was charged and then convicted and sent to prison for negligent homicide, vehicular homicide. And as it turns out, her vehicle was one of those defective vehicles because of the GM ignition switch.
Mm-hmm.
And how important it is, not just as trial lawyers, that we bring these cases, but that we bring them to light.
Right. And then you get into the discussion of protective orders and the confidentiality of documents. We get these parties all the time that want protective orders on documents that shouldn't be protected. And, we ought to get someone from public justice on to talk about the Remington case.
Yeah, absolutely.
What a great story that is about why documents need to come to light. But yeah,
because if they don't, and if we just willy-nilly agree to the protective orders just because it's the easy thing to do, then things like Harvey Weinstein comes to mind.
Right.
Harvey Weinstein continues to do. I can't put myself in the shoes of those people that agreed to those things, but the protective orders. But it sure would be nice to have all that information. And also, I wonder if GM knew about the ignition switch stuff from another case, that we didn't know about. And then this lady gets convicted, and as it turns out, it wasn't her fault that the wreck happened. And the reason why it came to light was because the trial lawyer brought it forward and gave it to the media and said, check this out.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So Kelsey, that we're going to have on, Kelsey Starks, I've known for several years now, was a local media personality, and she now does coaching, for people that are going to be on camera, whether it's up and coming reporters or things like that. And, for whatever reason, lately in the last several years, and maybe on the closing, I'll tell you a story about what not to do when you're interviewed by the press, which I've done before. But Kelsey, she does coaching. She's excellent. And I thought it'd be a good idea to have somebody to come on to talk about, what do we as lawyers need to know when a reporter contacts us, or we're going to be contacting a reporter on a case. So,
well, I mean, if you're an attorney, practicing attorney, that literally every statement you make could have 35 qualifications to it. And all the press is going to pick up or run with is just one statement. And so working with someone like Kelsey could help you refine and guide you to say what you really need to say without all those qualifications.
Yeah. And a lot of times, when I'm contacted for a quote, it's becoming more and more often. A lot of times, like when I talk to the reporter, I will talk to them on background, and Kelsey will talk to us about what that means. But then I'll tell them I'll prepare a statement for you, and then I will email them the statement, and that way I have time to sit down and think about, what it looks like. So when I'm watching the news at, 6:00, and they're going to quote Tad Thomas on something, what's it going to look like when it's, in bold letters? And so I take my time and prepare it and make sure it says what I want it to say. But before I fire it off to them.
Yeah. I mean, it's exciting when someone wants to ask you, like if it's about a case in particular. So I've talked to the press and done interviews on cases that I'm not involved with, like what's going on here. Could you provide some analysis? That's exciting.
Mm-hmm.
But working with someone like Kelsey, or doing what you said, which is, let me write this out first to make sure I'd want to actually see this on the news is really smart.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's introduce Kelsey Starks. And we're here today with Kelsey Starks. Kelsey, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
So Kelsey, tell us a little bit about your background. I mean, I know you from local media, but tell us about your background in journalism.
Yeah, I started, I like to say I started as a journalist in high school, because we started doing video production stuff there. And that's when I kind of got bit by the bug and started getting into video production, and went to college at the University of Kentucky, majored in broadcast journalism. And from there, I moved to New York City, where I worked for Court TV and MSNBC the time I was there. While I was at Court TV, I actually toyed with going to law school because, you're just surrounded by cases and it's so fascinating. And but I just stayed in the production side there. And then I went back to school and got my master's in journalism from Northwestern University. And then I kind of went on the on-air path, and we moved to Charleston, South Carolina, where I was a reporter there for a while. And then as part of my master's program, I did a stint in DC as well, doing political reporting, which was interesting too. And then I had the job offer here in Louisville, which I really kind of saw as a stepping stone. And that was kind of the next place to go before the next place. And I'm originally from Kentucky, of course, but just being closer to family was nice. And we ended up starting our family here. And then, here I am, I guess 10, 12 years later, still in Louisville. But in Louisville, I hosted a morning show on WHAS called Good Morning Kentuckiana. And after my third child was born, I realized the 2 a.m. alarm clock was a little much. So I retired from the morning show. And now I have my own company, Kelsey Starks Media, where I do video training and courses on, how to look good and confident on camera. I do corporate trainings and that kind of thing. So, and I also host a show on KET called News Quiz now. So just a lot of freelance work like that. So, and here I am.
Well, so we're going to get some free advice from you today then.
All right.
Even though you have a consulting company, I'm going to get you on a podcast so that I can ask you questions and not have to pay for the answers. How about that?
That sounds
the trick. We just were sitting around thinking, we need some free advice. Who can we ask? And we tricked you into coming on.
I didn't want to pay for a website, so we started an SEO company.
Same thing with video.
Smart.
So Kelsey, with your background in media, one of the things I'd like to talk to you about today is, how we can help lawyers when they have newsworthy cases. And, in recent years, I've had a couple where, I filed the suit, and then all of a sudden the phone rang from a reporter and, wanting to talk about the case. And, I'm a little nervous about what I say and how much information do I give and things like that. And so I'd love for you to kind of, tell us your feedback. If an attorney gets a call from a reporter about a case, what should they be thinking about? What should they be mindful of? And, how can they help that reporter as well as helping their case?
Yeah, I think this is such a great topic because I don't think a lot of people realize how similar the law and journalism professions are. And I think that's something to keep in mind too, is that, I know a lot of journalists who ended up going to law school and becoming lawyers, and same, it was the opposite. A lot of lawyers end up doing broadcast television. And it's because, we all have sort of a love of language and wording. And so I think it's important to kind of keep that in mind, that the people you're talking to as journalists are more like you than different from you. Because, if anybody gets a call from a reporter, I think they immediately kind of tense up like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen next?
Lawyers have that effect on people too.
Yeah, same thing. Right. So I think that's important to keep in mind. And the main thing that reporters are looking for stories is, a story, right? A compelling story. And so, when you take away the legalese of it, what's it really about? Is there a compelling character? Are there several compelling characters? Is there a beginning, middle, and end to the story? How did it start? What's going on now? And the story is probably how it will end up. But if you kind of think about each case as what's the story here, who are the compelling characters, and something that's relatable to a lot of people, like, gosh, that could happen to me, or that happened to my mom, or something that's relatable to other people. And the last thing is something that's timely. Right. So if you have something that there's a decision that's coming up to be made, obviously, or if there's something that's about to be filed, or, anything that makes it timely enough is probably what a newsroom or reporter is looking for most.
I always get nervous about how much I say and what I don't. What are the reporters looking for where I can give them what you're talking about, stuff that makes a story, but not telling them everything about my case. They probably don't want me to talk for 30 minutes about the facts of a case, right?
Right. So I think in this part, the most important thing is to try to develop a relationship with a reporter or reporters. So, find somebody that or is a friend of a friend of a friend, or has covered one of your cases before. Someone that you like their reporting, and they do a good job and they're ethical, and someone that you trust. And that way you can kind of feed them this information and even tell them things off the record or on background, or tell them that, here's the story, this is what's coming up. And don't be afraid to tell them in advance something like, I've got a case, I'm not going to be able to, publish anything about it until next week, but here's the background of it. Put it on your calendar. We're going to be in court next Friday. And if you can give them that background information in advance, the whole thing is to make it easy on reporters. They're busy, and more now than ever, newsrooms are cutting staff. A lot of them are going out on their own and doing their own camera work, and they don't have a lot of time. But they do have to come with a certain amount of stories in their pitch meeting every day. So they go in at 9 or 9:30 and they have to have 4 or 5 story ideas. So if you can put something on their calendar in advance, that's something off their plate easy, and they can start collecting information prior to that. They could even do an interview with you prior to that and hold it for when it is timely. And so when you do something like that, you're going to get a better story because they've had more time to work on it. And they're not doing a rushed deadline, on the Friday when the court case is. If they're putting it together right after the decision, it's more likely than not going to be a little sloppy. So that's my best advice for that.
Hey, that's really interesting. I guess I never thought about how much work goes into, you start with this funnel, you have, 5 stories and one makes it on the news that night, but they got to go out and get 5, not 1. And, how much they really have to work to dig those up, and how, we can offer, those stories to them. Talk to me about, the term on background. I've finally learned in one of my jobs is a term of art in your industry. What does it mean, and what do attorneys need to know when it means to talk on background?
Well, on background is like off the record, just that you're going to give them some information that is not for publication, but it's for their own understanding. And it's very, very helpful for a journalist to know the background of a story or a character or a person, obviously, when they're writing the story. It's all about perspective, right? And so if you can help them understand the background of a story, even if there are some facts or information that they cannot publish, it will help with how they write the story. Now, it is kind of a fine line, because you obviously don't want to give them information that you're not supposed to give them, or, don't want them to have in general. But as you start developing, it goes back to those relationships. If you develop a relationship with a particular journalist and you know that, that you can trust that person, and you can call them up on a Monday and say, here's a case I've got coming up, here's the background on it, but we can't say anything about it until Friday. You can trust that they're not going to say anything about it until Friday. But you could also give them information that will never be published, just for their own understanding. But it's really important to have that relationship with the journalist, because, you want somebody that you can trust.
What if you haven't developed those relationships yet, and maybe you're a new lawyer, or this is the first big case you've ever handled, and you want to reach out to somebody because it's newsworthy? What's your advice for reaching out?
I've never met a reporter who was not open to good story ideas. If you send well, here's how it works. If you send a press release to an assignment desk in a newsroom, and I'm talking about broadcast in general, I would think it's pretty much the same in a newspaper situation, but I've never worked in a print newsroom. So you send the news release, they will or will not talk about it in the morning meeting where they all get together and talk about stories for the day, right? If it's coming to a particular reporter, that person's going to have a little bit of ownership already. So to find a reporter, I would get emails all the time from people who just said, here's a good story. Are you interested? And a lot of times, and they're just so slammed for time. It's really hard to kind of break through the noise. But if you can find one who you see in court a lot, they're probably either a court focused reporter or particularly interested in that kind of thing. You could reach out to that person. And frankly, if there's just somebody you know from TV and you like watching their reporting, you think they do a good job, their email addresses are all on the station's website. They are all online. Particularly now with social media, you can find anybody and get in touch with them and say, hey, I've got a couple stories, and, ask them, take them out for coffee, or, and say, ask them, how do you like getting story ideas? Everybody loves a good source that the other way around too. Journalists love having those sources that, even if I have a case that isn't yours, to know an experienced attorney that I could call up and say, hey, what does this mean? I just saw this in court. For you to be able to help them out in that way, you just develop that relationship with them. And so, I think any journalist would see the benefit in finding you, just as you would see the benefit in finding them. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And Kelsey, on that point, I'm in Columbia, Missouri, which we have our J school here. I think it's pretty well known.
Yeah,
and
great school.
We have a lot of student reporters as well as people who stay here, who just choose to stay here. And one of the things I found beneficial is just reaching out to them or serving as someone that can say, if you have questions about this case, it's not my case. If you have questions about this case, feel free to text me or call me and I can explain. Because if you're, as a journalist, especially a student reporter, pleadings are the things that lawyers write in a complaint or an emotion are gobbledygook.
Oh gosh, yes. Very hard to cut through. Right. And especially I would say as a journalist, and particularly in broadcast, that every day you're expected to become an expert in a different area. So right. I get a story, they're like, go cover, the sewer problem at 9 a.m. And by 3 p.m., I'm expected to interview everybody, involved in that and become an expert to be able to explain it. And so it's tough. So if anyone can help cut through that, which lawyers are obviously great at because you understand the law, that's, everybody would appreciate having an expert to kind of pick their brain on anything like that.
Yep. Tell us real quick about your time on Court TV. Any tips for us based on what you learned there?
Well, it was a wild time. It's I'm sad it's like defunct now and doesn't exist any longer. But when I was there, I worked for Nancy Grace. And
oh wow! So, okay. Yeah, we could go down a rabbit hole there.
We totally could.
Yeah,
I have stories, but
I'm sure.
Yeah, but it was when we covered like the Lacey Peterson case, Kobe Bryant. That was the thing when I was there. Michael Jackson was in court, and it was really interesting to it was all legal analyzing, and all day long you hear it, and it was just interesting, and definitely the personalities were interesting. And Savannah Guthrie worked there when I was there. She was a reporter.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, so it's interesting now to kind of see where all those people have gone and ended up. But it was an excellent learning experience for me. I mean, I was right out of college, and that's when, all my professors told me, if you want to be in journalism, you're going to have to start in a small market and move to, Paducah or something. And I was 22 and a little overly ambitious and naive too, and said, nope, I'm going to move to New York City. And so
that's great.
But I did. And Court TV was a great experience because it was a big enough cable network where I got really great experience, but it was also small enough where I wasn't, getting people coffee as a brand new employee. I was, writing and producing and just a lot of great experience there. So, but it did make me fall in love with the law. I mean, I never thought that would be something I would want to focus on. And then it truly shaped how I went on as a general assignment reporter or anything. And I would always volunteer to go to court. Nobody wanted to go sit in court. And I was like, I will. I think it's really interesting. So yeah. And that's when I kind of realized, there's a lot of similarities between the two professions.
So how do Mike and I become the next Nancy Grace? That's the important.
No, thanks.
Really
I'm good.
Yeah, I'm
good.
all about it.
I'm good. Tad can do that. He can scream at the
Judge
Bring
TV.
back
Judy or
court
Nancy
TV,
Grace.
man.
Yeah.
Judge Judy or Nancy Grace. I'm doing one of the two.
I'm good. I'll watch.
Oh, man. Yeah.
So, Kelsey, if somebody wants to reach out for consulting, how do they find you?
Oh, you can go to my website. It's kelseystarks.com, and all my information's there. And I can, do custom training, or there's online courses, or it's really kind of taken off in this environment because everybody's on camera, right? Here we are on Zoom right now. And so I talk a lot about how to set up your camera and lighting and that kind of thing to look good on camera. And
we should have probably talked about that before we started the podcast.
I'm just thinking in my head, I'm like,
you all look great.
Damn it.
Absolutely great. I love the depth, Tad, and the lighting. Love it. Great.
My wife set this up. She
Well, Reagan's the best, so that makes sense. Yeah. So anyway, it's been great. Yeah. So I'm just thrilled that you guys reached out, because this is just right up my alley.
Lawyers everywhere, if you are listening, it is important for you to know how to appear, whether it's on Twitter,
It is
Facebook Live, Instagram.
Yeah. People who
TikTok
thought that they would be on camera are on camera now. And it's, it's not the same as being on the phone. So
reach out to Kelsey.
I can help.
Do yourself a favor.
Kelsey, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you all. This has been a lot of fun.
Great. Have a good one.
Thanks. You too.
Wow, she's outstanding. I bet that you wish that you had Kelsey around when you were at the Kentucky Attorney General's office, huh, Tad?
Oh, we're going to go there. Yeah. Yes. It was a late Friday afternoon, and I was, number 3 in charge or whatever. And our communications person was gone, and everybody above me on the food chain was gone, and got a call about a case. It was an abortion doctor in Lexington who we were prosecuting, not because he was doing abortions, but because he was defrauding Medicaid. And I thought it was a newspaper reporter calling me wanting a quote. And I said, let's talk on background. And he kept insisting, I'd like a quote. I'd like a quote. And we talked for a while. And then finally he's like, nice guy. I was like, oh, can I get a quote? Sure. So I gave him a quote. And it turned out it was not a newspaper. It was someone interviewing me for Jerry Falwell's syndicated radio station that was on 400 radio stations that weekend. And I got an appropriate scolding from our communications person that following Monday after she found out what happened. I can't remember if the Attorney General was mad at me or if he just was laughing his ass off at me. One way or the other.
Both.
It was, yeah. And then after one other incident, within 6 months of me being at the Attorney General's office, I was forbidden from ever speaking with the press again, and probably appropriately so. I needed someone like Kelsey Starks to coach me on what to say and what not to say.
That's the thing is you get a call from someone, and again, you're excited about talking to them, and then they urge you, and then you're out of a politeness, you say something, And next thing you know, you guys are championing the cause of the Jerry Falwell school. What is it? Liberty and their beliefs and everything.
Yeah. And so now I'm appropriately gun shy. Anytime I get a call from the press, I'm like, all right, what am I going to say? What are all the ways that this can go bad for me?
I mean, that's something that we have to think about. And the thing I'd encourage anyone listening to this is to check with your local rules about, okay, if I have a case and I think it's noteworthy, how do I ensure that I'm not violating client confidence is one, or running afoul of any rule because in some states you cannot send the complaint to a press agency. Out of the box. They have to actually find it. And I think talking with Kelsey and working with Kelsey on how that could happen is really important.
Yeah. And, your state ethics rules are so important because, in a lot of states, just because information is public doesn't mean you can necessarily go out and blab about it or, so on and so forth. And yeah, so you got to be really careful. And if you've got a case that you want to go to the press about, pull the rules out, read them again, then pick up the phone and call somebody else who knows better than you. And then after they tell you what to do or not to do, then read the rules again.
Yeah, maybe
before you take a step out there. But
maybe.
There's, we talked that there are appropriate cases where the public needs to hear that these cases are going on. And the whole point in my mind, and it's not just, people talk about punitive damages or for changes in conduct and compensatories or just to compensate for losses. No, the entire system is set up to make sure that there's changes in conduct and that better products are out there, or doctors do a better job, or lawyers do a better job in legal malpractice cases. But if you have everything done behind closed doors, under protective orders, and it never sees the light of day, that's not justice. That's not the way the system was set up. And there's good case law out there in a lot of jurisdictions about things being done in the open. And so if you have one of those cases, if you got the Remington case or the GM ignition case or whatever, where there's something that's happened that can affect a large number of people, the public should know about it. And we as lawyers, A, should be allowed to talk about it, and B, ought to know how to do it and be able to talk to somebody like Kelsey or a PR person or somebody like that so that we know how to get this messaging out.
It's super important. I mean, that's why I know it's why you do what you do. It's why I do what I do. And I know a lot of the people who listen to this podcast are involved with the organizations we're involved with. I mean, we cannot rely on regulatory agencies or criminal prosecutions to occur if the change happens, for instance, with a defective product. That's us. We carry that.
Got the most recent free speech case out of the middle district of Missouri, right?
Yeah. So as a Twitter, as a free speech case that
you were trolling politicians.
I was, a politician, my state representative blocked me on Twitter, and I got unconstitutionally, according to a federal judge. I testified, and we won. And it's in the 8th Circuit. And if the 8th Circuit reverses, then we've got a circuit split and we'll be in United States Supreme Court. 2nd Circuit has said you can't do that. And so I didn't, because I was the client in that situation. Anytime the press called out, I always took my own advice, which I always tell my clients, don't talk to the press. So I always said, contact my attorney. As soon as the case was submitted to the judge, then I started giving statements.
I hope that we can do a podcast about how the Supreme Court heard a case of Mike Campbell trolling some politician on Twitter. When we went to law school, we dreamt of arguing in front of the Supreme Court and standing in front of the justices and arguing your case. And who would have thought that because you're up late at night harassing a politician, Mike, that you may be in front of the Supreme Court of the United States?
Well, in my defense, they were sort of this is incorrect. They were polite tweets. It was a retweet, and this specific state representative, I mean, just to give you a sort of feel for it, she was on the federal courthouse steps out yelling at my attorney and I screaming, terrible words you should not say in public, especially not on like federal courthouse steps. I mean, I consider those places very honored and sacred. And so she's screaming these things at us, and a reporter asks, what do you think about that? Like, this is kind of nutty, right? And I'm like, well, that's why I'm here, free speech. And that was the ending quote of the story. So it's an interesting case for sure. And I took my own advice, and this is a lesson to all the lawyers out there. If the press calls you, either don't say anything or get with someone like Kelsey who can tell you exactly what to say or how to say it, I guess.
And prep for it. Don't just wing it. Don't on a Friday afternoon in the office when everybody else is gone, give a quote. Make sure you get it
right. And make sure that you have a plan in place, and that you are thinking the thing through. I like the idea of writing it all out and then saying, I'm gonna submit this. If you can't do that, then get into contact with someone like Tad, who knows how to make really bad mistakes.
Yeah,
tell you what not to do.
Well, we'll leave them with this. My dad used to always say, "A smart man learns from his mistakes. A smarter man learns from the mistakes of others." So learn from my mistakes.
Learn from them. Yes, there you go. Perfect. I love it.
All right, Mike.
Till next time, brother.
All right. Talk to you later.
That wraps another episode of the official Lawyer Minds podcast. Please consider subscribing to the show wherever you listen to podcasts. Explore the other content Lawyer Minds has to offer and engage with us on social media. Your feedback on the show and ideas for future shows is always welcomed. See you next time.